The last time I reviewed the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, I admit I was a little bit disappointed because during that time I thought Mercedes had lost their way just a little bit with the S-Class and the C-Class. But this isn't all new Mercedes. We now have an absolutely class-leading Mercedes-Benz C-Class that is probably the best in its category and is priced like it's the best in the category. And then we have this Mercedes-Benz S-Class, and price is part of the reason I had a problem with the last generation model. You see, the S-Class sits in a category almost unto its own. The Kia K900 could be considered in this category. It's the least expensive at $54,500. We then have the Lexus LS at basically $72,000, the BMW 7 Series at $74,000, the Jaguar XJ about $200 higher, and the Audi A8 at $81,000. But the S-Class starts at $94,000. By the time you've added a few options to your base S-Class, like the up-level audio system and the partial wood steering wheel, you're easily at $115,000. And the moderately equipped model we're taking a look at here is just under $137,000. Are you thinking to yourself that calling this moderately equipped at over $40,000 over the base price sounds ridiculous? Well, you need to keep in mind the S-Class goes up to over $230,000. And that is the key difference between this and the LS, the 7 Series, the XJ, and the A8. Because at $115,000 like I would lightly equip my model, or $137,000 like this model right here, you're actually over the price of most of those competitors. That means the S-Class is really kind of a tweener vehicle. It sits between the regular full-size luxury sedans and something like a baby-Bentley or a Rolls-Royce Wraith. Now, the only direct competitor in a similar price range to this is the Porsche Panamera. It does get a hair more expensive depending on the model you get. The Aston Martin Rapide is about $200,000 or so starting, and something like the Maserati Quattroporte is somewhat similar. It starts right around $107,000, but it doesn't go as high as the Mercedes. To me, the previous generation of the S-Class always looked a little bit cartoonish, but that's not going on in this generation. They've tightened the lines, they've made it more aggressive, and a little bit more appealing to my eye. We have full LED headlamps on this car, and in fact, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class is one of the first vehicles that is all LED everywhere. There's not a single traditional incandescent bulb in this vehicle, and it contains nearly 400 LEDs. Unlike the cheaper LED headlamps you find down market from this, these do steer in the corners. They're also dynamic beam in some countries. Unfortunately, in the United States, we don't get that ability to vary the beam pattern like we do get in Europe, so ours are a little bit more boring. Of course, our model has a few options, so we do have the dynamic radar cruise control system. It's a radar sensor right behind this portion of the front bumper, and we have a little hood ornament right here. Out back, we get more LEDs, LED light pipes on these large tail lamp modules. In a traditional Mercedes design, we don't have tail lamps that wrap over onto the trunk lid. That does mean the trunk opening is a little bit smaller than some of those other cars out there. We have very well integrated exhaust tips and very well integrated parking sensors in the back. The rear end design language of the S-Class in the last few generations has been a weak point in my mind. I think that the current generation Audi A8 is a little bit more attractive, a little bit more handsome in the back. This is definitely more attractive than the last generation, however. The design language is simple and elegant, but definitely a Mercedes. We get that usual arch that we've seen out of the last few generations of Mercedes products, where the line right here on the greenhouse comes up and then drops slightly towards the rear. The S-Class is not small by any stretch of the imagination, but it may surprise you that the Quattroporte is actually a hair longer than the S550 that we're taking a look at right here. In fact, this is really not that much longer than a large majority of American full-size sedans. So something like a Ford Taurus, a Lincoln MKS, or a Chrysler 300, they're really not that far off the S-Class in size. Of course, if you need more car, Mercedes would be happy to sell you an S600 Maybach, which gets a stretch of around 9 inches and definitely makes it a very long car for the United States. That puts it right in the running, especially with the base Bentleys and base Rolls-Royce models. Although it looks like we have a sexy coupe-like profile here with the rear window, this is still a vehicle that's designed for carrying people in the back of the car, and so we have a roofline that remains relatively high towards the rear. Now, if you're wondering what differentiates the S550 from the top-end S65 AMG, you can find the big part of that difference right here under the hood, because there are several different engines available. Things start out with this 4.7-liter twin-turbo V8 engine. It produces 449 horsepower and a whopping 516 pound-feet of torque. Power is sent either to the rear or to all 4 wheels via a 7-speed automatic transmission. For the same price, you can get the S550 plug-in hybrid. It uses a 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine, and that produces 329 horsepower by itself, augmented with a 114 horsepower electric motor. The engine produces 354 pound-feet of torque and the electric motor produces 251. Those don't combine completely together, so you don't just add those totals up because the torque and horsepower curves of the motor and the engine don't necessarily align. But either way, it's not that far off of this base 4.7 liter V8. If you want more power, there is a 6 liter twin turbo V12 engine producing 523 horsepower and 612 pound-feet of torque. And if that's not insane enough for you, that is really only the middle engine, because from there we go up to a 5.5 liter twin turbo V8 producing 577 horsepower and 664 pound-feet of torque. And if that's still not enough for you, there is yet another 6 liter twin turbo V12 producing 621 horsepower and 738 pound-feet of torque. I'll let you refer to the fuel economy chart over there on the side of your screen. Obviously, if you get that 6 liter twin turbo V12, fuel economy is not going to be all that great in the S-Class. Weight is a big killer when it comes to fuel economy, so in this particular segment, the more fuel-efficient choices would be, for instance, the short-wheelbase BMW 7 Series or the short-wheelbase Jaguar XJ. The XJ is very, very light, and it has a relatively small V6 as a starting engine. As you'd expect from a car that costs this much, front seat comfort does come in at 10 out of 10 points. We have a tilt telescopic steering column that's powered and memory linked, and a multi-way driver's seat and passenger seat. These seats move in a variety of different ways, and even the 4-way adjustable headrest is powered and memory linked. We also have an extending thigh cushion and a multi-way adjustable lumbar support. Our particular model also has the massaging front seat option. When it comes to rear seat comfort, we also get 10 out of 10 points. Our model has the optional power rear seats, again with 4-way power adjustable headrests. We also get ventilated and heated seats in the back. We get our own moonroof back here. That's all happening because it's important to remember that the S-Class is used as a limo in some countries. So logically, if we move over to the right side of the car in the US, then we get the ability to actually move the front seat forward with the buttons right over here on the door. We also have a leg rest. We obviously have 4-zone climate control, powered sunshades, and pillows right here on the seats. Fold down center armrest with a storage cubby, AV inputs, 2 large cup holders, and then our model also has the rear seat entertainment system, which is remote controlled. And you can also use the remote control from the rear to actually control the command display that's right up there up front. In sort of an interesting twist, these rear displays give you sort of an airline style status update of your navigation. You can also control media functionality and a number of other features with these screens in the back and the remote control. Now, because these rear seats do contort in a variety of different ways, we have no trunk pass-through in the S-Class. We do, however, have a small storage cubby that can optionally be cooled. Now, there is a middle seat in our S-Class, and if I sit here, it is relatively comfy. My hair does barely brush the ceiling, but there is still a decent amount of headroom, and although I wouldn't want to sit here for too long, this is actually relatively comfortable for a luxury sedan that really only has 4 people in mind. The downside for the excellent passenger accommodations in the rear really can be found right back here in the cargo area, because this trunk is definitely smaller than you'd think for a car this size. The reason for that is the optional cooler, the optional reclining rear seats, they all have to go somewhere, and that comes right out of the trunk. That means when it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'm going to give this 6 out of 10 points. It would be difficult to put 4 people's luggage in this cargo area and go away for a weekend if you packed heavy, although we do have a power trunk lid. Up front, our model has these 4-way power adjustable headrests. They are memory linked and they do go up and down and in and out. We also have butterfly style cushions which allow you to pull the sides of the headrest in and out, and manually height adjustable seat belts. Our model does have one of the fairly expensive up-level leather options. There are a wide variety of different leather colors and types available. The front door panels are incredibly well done. This is all stitched leather here, so we have this sort of quilted effect leather panel here which matches the dashboard, leather in this section of the door panel and on the armrest. The controls for our multi-way driver's seat with the adjustable thigh cushion extension right there, heating, ventilation, the ability to control the right seat from the driver's control panel, 3-position memory, our laser cut speaker grills right there, and controls over the rear windows and rear window shades. As you'd expect, parts quality does not decline as we go to the rear, so we still have this quilted effect leather stitching on the doors. This is all leather for this entire door panel right here. You can again see those controls for the headrests, 4-way, in and out and up and down. You can adjust the back and the seat bottom cushion. We of course have 3-position memory buttons. These controls here control all the shades in the car. So these are the window shades, the skylight shade, and the shade on the rear window. And then we have these very nicely done laser cut speaker grills. Moving over to the dashboard, we again have more of that quilted look leather. Leather on top of the dashboard, leather right here in the middle, and a lot of leather going on underneath it as well. The glove box is a moderately sized glove compartment with a slot above. I was not able, however, to put an iPad inside. We have some additional storage in the S-Class right here under the front of the passenger seat. This is the passenger seat bottom cushion, and you can see we have a very small storage cubby right there. I'll show you a few different views of the dashboard, but this first one is more straight on in the middle. You can see that we have this very large, high-resolution, widescreen infotainment display. It actually sort of floats above the dashboard, so you can actually stick your finger right there behind it, and that is all backlit with backlighting at night. For more diffuse air distribution, we actually have an air vent right here below the screen in addition to these 4 air vents that you're seeing right here. Now these are open and closable via this little knob right here. It's an electric system, so we actually rotate that little knob, and the damper inside there actually turns those vents off. Behind that, we find the controls for the front 2 climate zones. You can also control the rear zone from that command display. We get our ashtray and cigarette lighter right there, and then a storage cubby right here that also contains our optical disc player, and we flip this little lid up to reveal 2 very large cup holders right there. Controls for the vehicle and Mercedes-Benz command are found right down here. We have the controls for air suspension, that's a high height mode, sport and comfort, the sport and eco modes for the transmission, back button for the command system, the touch controller for the command system right here. This is a touch sensitive area, and then we have our command dial knob right here, touch back button, touch favorites button, and a contextual menu bring up button. We then have a direct access button for seat controls and command, navigation, radio, hazard lights, media, telephone, and vehicle settings. Over on the other side, we have the power button for the command system, volume, scroll up and down, and a auto start stop enable disable button. Behind that, we have a softly padded center armrest, and it opens up to reveal a very, very small storage cubby. It's important to keep in mind that we do have the 4-zone climate control system, and all that climate control hardware has to go somewhere, and that is basically right under this area. So you can put a wallet, cell phone, that sort of thing right in there, but that's about it. It does open from either side, however, to allow your passenger easy access to that compartment as well. From this angle, you can see that there are 2 large LCDs, and again, they are floating slightly above the dashboard in that fashion. There are controls right in between. These raise and lower the rear headrests. We also have the rear sunshade raise and lower button, and an instrument panel dimmer. This instrument panel dimmer is the only thing that strikes me as a little bit odd because it does seem out of place. If you want to know more about Mercedes Command, go ahead and click that link at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to my dedicated Command video where I go into both screens in greater detail. But basically, this right panel controls vehicle functions, your media, your navigation, etc. It is very nicely done. All the graphics are very snappy. It's definitely more responsive than the last generation system. And then the display on the left right over here is your instrument panel. In addition to giving you the very traditional speedometer and tachometer that we're seeing here, we also get the trip computer functionality in the middle. And because our model has the optional night vision system, you can see that camera display there between the gauges as well. The display is not quite as configurable as something like Cadillac's Q, but the display is done very nicely. This is also where you get things like the navigation readouts, radio controls, media controls, telephone interface, and assistance graphics as well. Because our model has the optional radar cruise control as well as the lane keeping assistance system, this shows you the readout of those particular systems. The only inconvenience that has not been addressed in this generation of the Mercedes-Benz S-Class is that changing tracks on your device is done via this display. There is no dedicated track up or down button anywhere on the steering wheel. You either have to use this interface and the buttons on the steering wheel or the control in the center of the car. In a definite improvement over the last generation S-Class steering wheel, we now have a 3-spoke design that's very tastefully done in our model with wood on the top and wood on the bottom right there on the inside, shift paddles behind, and then here are the buttons. We have buttons that control that multifunction instrument cluster right there, home button, up, down, OK, and then a back button. Again, no dedicated track forward or backward button. You'll find the voice command button over here and the voice command off button on the other side. Phone hang up and pick up buttons, volume up, down, and a mute button right there. Mercedes loves stock, so we do find 4 of them on the steering wheel. The one on the right is for the gear shift, down for drive, up for reverse, and the button at the end is park. On the left side of the steering wheel, we find 3 more. This is the turn signal and windshield wiper stock. This stock controls the steering column itself, up, down, in, and out. And then, of course, the heated functionality. And then this is the cruise control stock. We get cancel, resume, acceleration, deceleration, and then this knob controls the distance. To the left of all of that, we find the controls for things like our lane keeping assistance system, lane departure warning system, the 360 camera system, the night vision system, and the heads-up display. Heads-up displays are notoriously difficult to catch on video cameras, so I'll zoom in right there and post a picture of what this display actually looks like in person. It gives you your speed, also gives you details about your cruise control system, and information from the navigation system as well. When it comes to acceleration, the slowest times in the S-Class will be in the plug-in hybrid model. The model we're taking a look at here is the next slowest, and slow is of course a relative term, because this ran from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, which is insanely fast. That's thanks as much to this twin-turbo V8 engine as the fact that this model has the optional Mercedes-Benz 4Matic all-wheel drive system. And I would definitely get 4Matic on any S-Class because it seriously helps improve the traction. It's just zero drama. You floor this car and it just takes off with no drama on practically any surface. And that's not something that you get in the rear-wheel drive competitors or in the rear-wheel drive versions of the S-Class. There's definitely a luxury to be had in being able to apply all 449 horsepower whenever you want to. This rocket-like acceleration almost goes contrary to the curb weight of this Mercedes because it is incredibly heavy. The XJ is particularly light in this segment, being actually about the same weight as a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. That heavy curb weight in the S-Class does affect braking scores, and I'm going to have to give braking a B in this particular vehicle because even though we have very, very grippy tires, very wide tires, braking times are going to be longer than the lighter entries in this segment. There's just no way around that. When it comes to handling, however, the S-Class seriously impresses. You wouldn't think that a vehicle like this with an air suspension, it is in the comfort mode right now as well, mind you, could handle as well as this car does. It feels like I'm driving a living room out on this winding mountain road, and this living room handles like it's on rails. I might even call the S-Class an unexpected amount of fun because there's just something amusing about a car that's as big as this that handles this well. And of course, again, this is just the S550, so there are models that handle even better than this. Of course, if you get the S65, it will handle better, but it's also going to be a little bit heavier. Air suspensions do incredibly well out on gravel roads like we're on right here, or really any road that has a lot of imperfections going on. So if you're in an inner city area with poor roads, this will give you absolutely the best ride. Of course, there are a few trade-offs when it comes to suspensions like this, because a regular old coil spring suspension will give you a less floaty-boaty ride, I guess that's how you'd call it, than something like we're in here, but this will give you the most polished feeling. An interesting benefit in some of these air ride suspension systems, specifically the Lexus and the Mercedes systems, is that they allow you to actually adjust the ride height of the vehicle, very much like a Range Rover or a Land Rover or certain Jeep products. And right now we're in the high height mode, which gives you a little bit more clearance if you're concerned about driving on a road like this. That's not something that you find in something like, for instance, my Jaguar XJ. Even though mine has a full four-corner air suspension system, it's not adjustable in that manner. Of course, the current generation XJ only has a rear air suspension for load leveling, so when you put people in the back, it helps return the suspension to the original ride height. They've actually removed the front air suspension system in this current generation of Jaguar to help improve handling. For me, the most interesting thing about this generation of S-Class is how sorted this air suspension feels, because the air suspension in my Jag feels pretty ponderous, and it feels pretty ponderous in the Lexus LS. If you want to know the difference between a traditional suspension setup and an air suspension setup, I actually suggest you go to the Lexus dealer because it's pretty easy to find Lexus LS models with and without the air suspension, and you can drive them back to back and see what an air suspension does to the handling feel of a vehicle. Now, the absolute handling ability of the vehicle is affected slightly by air suspensions, but it's primarily the feel. Because the S-Class has a luxury mission in mind, we can put the suspension in sport mode without putting the transmission in sport mode. That is a very nice touch in this vehicle. It means the suspension is a little bit firmer. This is never going to be anything along the lines of a regular stock BMW 7 Series in terms of suspension harshness, but it does give you a very nice feel. In terms of cabin noise, we also get an A+. This cabin is easily the quietest I've ever tested. Even the engine is incredibly muted. This reminds me an awful lot of the more traditional Rolls-Royce way of doing things. Power was listed as sufficient and everything was whisper quiet. In their mind, the best engine was the one that you couldn't hear but still rocketed you from 0 to 60 as fast as you wanted to go. That's exactly what's going on in this S-Class. Fuel economy is obviously going to be a problem in any luxury vehicle this large, and we have been averaging around 18 miles per gallon, which is a little bit below what Mercedes will tell you you're going to get. Depending on how you drive it, you can drive this as low as around 12 overall if you're driving it hard out on your favorite road. Of course, if you want better fuel economy, there is that plug-in hybrid version of the S-Class that will give you absolutely incredible fuel economy for this segment. Definitely better fuel economy than you'll find in the Lexus LS Hybrid. If you're looking to consume the most fuel possible, then any of the twin-turbo V12s in this segment will be your engine of choice. The S-Class actually has two missions in mind. It's designed to be a car to be driven by Americans as well as to be driven around in other countries. In America, we tend to have fewer chauffeurs than in other places in the world. And interestingly enough, this really does straddle that fence incredibly well. It actually is an awful lot of fun to drive out on the road, and those rear seats are a joy to sit in and be driven as well. I don't think the previous version of the S-Class had this balance down quite right. It wasn't nearly as much fun to drive as this particular version. Even though, of course, we have relatively little steering feel in this vehicle. Steering feel is something that's been disappearing all across the spectrum these days. This does have a very, very accurate steering rack. It's very easy to tell exactly what this car is doing at all times, and it's really easy to tell the limits in this car, and the limits are pretty darn high. Now that said, this does not feel as direct or as connected as the BMW 7 Series or the Lexus LS or the Jaguar XJ. The Jaguar XJ really is tops in this particular segment. The Lexus LS and the BMW 7 Series are very close seconds. The LS actually has a very nice direct feel to it, and because it is one of the few vehicles in this segment that has a naturally aspirated engine, it also has a very traditional feel all the way around. There is still a little bit of turbo lag in this V8 engine, but there is so much power all the way around out of this V8 engine that you're never going to notice that turbo lag. I wasn't the biggest fan of the last generation S-Class. It just let me down a little bit. This generation, however, has restored all of my faith in the Mercedes brand and in the S-Class itself, because this is exactly what I want my big Mercedes to be. I want it to be big, I want it to be bold, but not brash. I want it to definitely stand out in a crowd, but not be overly flashy. I want it to be incredibly luxurious on the inside, impossibly quiet, and insanely fast. And this S-Class checks all of those boxes. And on top of all of that, we get impeccable handling and an interior that really is world-class. This interior can stand next to some of those ultra-luxury vehicles available even in this $137,000 S-Class. I realize that may sound a little bit insane, but if you want a Rolls-Royce sedan, you're not going to get an interior that's necessarily that much nicer, but you're going to pay about 3 times the price of this. So how much will those engines set you back? Well, for $94,400, you get your choice of either the base V8 or the plug-in hybrid. If you want the S63 AMG, that's that twin-turbo V8 engine, that's $141,650. For $166,900, you get the S600 Maybach, and that actually has the slightly less powerful twin-turbo V12, but it does stretch the body out by about 8 inches or so. The next stop up from there is that top-end twin-turbo V12 S65 AMG, and that starts at $220,000. I talk a lot about value on this channel, so how does the S-Class stack up? Well, honestly, value in this end of the luxury segment is a tricky thing to talk about because there is so much value wrapped up in the brand itself. If all you were after was 90% of the features that we get in this particular vehicle for a cheap price, then look no further than the Kia K900 because it gives you almost everything that we're getting in this S-Class for an awful lot less money. We get the self-closing power rear doors, we get the seats in the back that are heated and ventilated and powered and memoried. The Kia also gives you LED headlamps and a very nicely done interior. Is it as nicely done as the Mercedes? No, it certainly is not, and you certainly don't get the same kind of luxury add-ons and upgrades that we get in this particular model, like the heated door panels, the fact that leather is plastered absolutely everywhere, and the overall design and touches that we get in this interior just aren't replicated at that end of the food chain. That's where this generation of the S-Class has seriously improved over the previous generation, because this interior is miles ahead of every other entry in this segment, even the very, very nicely done Audi A8. This interior makes the Lexus LS and the BMW 7 Series seem kind of cheap, actually. Now, that isn't really a knock on the LS or the 7 Series because those are considerably less expensive than the S500 that we're getting here. Again, if you're just talking about features for the dollar, you'll find better value in the Lexus or in the BMW. Now, on the flip side of that, I think this is better value than the Porsche Panamera. We get a more comfortable interior. It's not quite as nicely done as certain versions of the Panamera. Porsche has spent an awful lot of time, especially with their wood inlays in that car, and the Panamera does come across as slightly more expensive feeling, but you will pay for it because that Panamera can go up to $265,000. Maserati's Quattroporte is very nicely done, but it doesn't have anything on this back seat. The Quattroporte also uses Chrysler's infotainment and navigation system because Maserati is part of the Fiat Chrysler group, and that really does look a little bit lower rent than what we have going on in this generation. The Quattroporte feels sporty and its engines have a great sound, but it's not as comfortable as the S-Class. It also doesn't feel quite as premium. Kind of an interesting twist about the Quattroporte is that it's distantly related to the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, because the Quattroporte shares some design cues with the Chrysler 300, and the Chrysler 300 is based on a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, one size smaller than this. It is a little bit obvious when you step inside because it doesn't really feel as wide as the current generation S-Class. Obviously, this won't make you feel quite as special as a baby-Bentley, but of course for $220,000 you are getting a bi-turbo V12 that is incredibly powerful. I think it actually is a little bit more fun than the Bentley Flying Spur. The most direct competitor in the mainline luxury brands would be the Audi A8. The A8 starts a little bit less than this and we get a little bit less feature content for the price, but Audi approaches this level of feature and functionality across the board with their high-performance A8 models. If you're after the best handling luxury vehicle in this segment, look no further than the Jaguar XJ. It is incredibly light because of the all-aluminum construction on the XJ and Jaguar's newfound dedication to sporty driving and sporty handling. It outhandles the S-Class hands down. On the downside, the Jaguar does not feel quite as special as this, and there really isn't anything in the Jaguar portfolio to compete with the top-end trims of the S-Class. If you're looking for one of the best luxury vehicles in the United States without going a little bit too crazy with a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class is really hard to beat. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Mercedes S550. Go ahead and click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen so you can check out all of my other related videos. You can also check out the Kia K900, which is sort of Mercedes-Benz aspirational, if you like. It's trying its best to be this kind of vehicle, and while it doesn't achieve that, it is a very good value for those of us like me that have no hope of ever affording an S550.